Well, good morning. Thank you for joining me today for what has become an annual tradition here at Northern Kentucky University. The president of the university does a presentation about the upcoming annual budget. As I was thinking about this presentation, the word tradition suggests that something becomes routine or something is traditional or something is routine or rote. But I think it's fair to say after the last 3 months down in Frankfurt, this has been anything but a traditional or routine year, and this is anything but a typical or standard budget presentation. And as I say, it's been particularly challenging because of the protracted and contentious debate over the last 3 or 4 months down in Frankfurt. And as you probably know, it was that the state budget, wasn't formally approved literally until the last minute, until virtually midnight on Friday. It was truly a last-minute deal between the House and the Senate and the governor. And as a result, it's been a challenge for us to prepare for the budget, to prepare a proposed budget for next year. We have for many months, folks all across campus, deans and program directors, division heads have been preparing various plans based upon the different scenarios that we were hearing about down in Frankfurt, and those plans vary depending on the outcome of those negotiations. And through that time and more intensively last week, spent some time briefing the members of our Board of Regents on our university budget and the impact of those discussions down in Frankfurt, the impact of those discussions and negotiations on our own budget. And then spent some time, after spending a little time in the sun at a high school track meet on Saturday, spent a little time on Saturday and Sunday finalizing this presentation. But given the impact of those last-minute external decisions, I'm not yet fully prepared to present all of the details, all of the specifics of our plans for next year's budget. After consulting with the Board of Regents last week, as I said, in light of the fluid and dynamic situation, the Board of Regents has suggested that we take a little bit more time to finalize some of those details and to present a proposed budget to the board in a few weeks. So what I'm going to do this morning for you is give you a lot of information to provide you some context for our budget presentation based upon a variety of key factors, and I'm going to show you how those factors then influence our budget. And then at the end, I'll describe the process that we'll go through over the next 21 to about 30 days to actually finalize the preparation of our budget for the Board of Regents. So here's an overview of, there we go. Here's an overview of today's presentation. As I said, I'm going to talk about the budget context, talk about several factors that impact our budget, talk about how we're in the process not only of developing a specific budget for next fiscal year, but also developing a 2-year strategy to deal with some of the challenges that we face in higher education here in Kentucky. Then describe the process that I alluded to just a moment ago, describe the process that we'll go through over the next 30 days, and then share some details about our enrollment strategies, our short-term and long-term strategies to enhance and bolster enrollment here at NKU because of the importance of continuing to attract outstanding students to our university. So let me begin then first with the historical and some current data about enrollment and retention at NKU. Here is a chart. Those of you who are sitting in the back now, you're going to regret that because it's going to be hard to see some of these numbers. But here's a chart that shows fall undergraduate enrollment at Northern Kentucky University. And as you see, undergraduate enrollment at NKU peaked in about 2010. As you see on the chart, peaked at 2010 at about 13,500 students. And since 2010, there's been a steady but modest decline in undergraduate enrollment. That decline over that period has been about 3%. To give you some context, the national average of undergraduate enrollment across all institutions, public and private, has been about the same. It's been about 2.7% decline over that same 4-year period. So our enrollment has roughly declined at about the same rate as the national average. This next chart then shows you fall freshman enrollment. And this chart reflects new freshman undergraduate enrollment. And there are 2 slices on that chart. The big slice that's in gold are those incoming first-time, full-time freshmen who are coming here to seek a bachelor's degree. The slice on the top that you see in gray are those students who are enrolling in our associate's degree. And what you'll see in about 2012 is a significant increase in the number of students who are in that associate's degree because we developed a new program called the Pathfinders program. Many of you are familiar with that program. And it was part of our strategic effort to continue to enforce the discipline of higher admission standards, to have the discipline of maintaining more rigorous admission standards, but still providing educational opportunities for students who wanted to come to NKU. And so we've been encouraging them to take advantage of the wraparound support services in the Pathfinders program. And that, as I say, is a result of a deliberate strategy. There's another challenge, though, not only our internal challenge of recruiting and retaining a stronger freshman class, but there's another challenge that has affected our capacity to enroll new freshmen over the last 4 or 5 years, and that is the regional demographics here in the tri-state region. There has been, simply put, there's been a significant decline in the number of men and women who have been graduating from high schools in Kentucky, Ohio, and Indiana. And let me give you just a couple of statistics. In Kentucky, the number of high school graduates peaked in 2010. As you see, it's peaked at the same time that our undergraduate enrollment peaked. And it has declined over a 3-year period from 2010 to the class that graduated in 2013. It declined by 10%. And it is expected to increase incrementally through 2018, but it's never going to reach, there are no projections in the next 5, 10, or 15 years that the number of high school graduates in Kentucky will reach that peak that we graduated in 2010. So that's Kentucky statistics. In Ohio, again, the number of high school graduates from Ohio high schools peaked and leveled off in 2008 through 2010. And since 2010 through 2014, that number has declined 8%. And while there is some fluctuation in the projections going forward, there's no projection over the next 5, 10, or 15 years in Ohio that the number of high school graduates will approach the number that occurred in 2008, 2009, 2010. Same trend in Indiana. Peak of graduates in 2010, and over the last 4 years, from 2010 to 2014, it's declined by 5%, and it's projected to be flat through at least 2020. So our challenge to maintain new incoming enrollment, we're into a headwind because of the decline in high school graduates in the areas that we serve. And that situation, as I said, isn't likely to improve. That demographic situation is not likely to improve for at least the next 5 to 10 years. So here is another chart that shows a significant factor that affects undergraduate enrollment, and that is our success in retaining those new freshmen, retaining them from the freshman year to the sophomore year. And as you see on this chart, there's been some modest recent improvement. The last 2 years in 13, and the classes that enrolled in 13 and 14 retained at a rate of 69%, which is equivalent to the highest over that 10-year period. So we've seen modest improvement, but this chart continues to illustrate why it's so important for us to continue to work on those initiatives that will help us to retain outstanding new students, undergraduate students. And here's a chart that shows fall graduate enrollment. And again, as you can see on this chart, our graduate enrollment peaked in 2010, 2011, and then has declined pretty steadily over the last 3 or 4 years. And there really are 2 factors that are driving that decline. First, in many graduate programs, enrollment is countercyclical to the economy. That is, people return to get additional education and training when their job prospects deteriorate because of a poor economy. So in many institutions all across the country, in various programs, there was an increase in graduate enrollment in 2009, 2010, 2011, and as the economy improved, there were fewer people who were seeking additional training and education in certain fields. The other fact that is causing a headwind for graduate enrollment is increasing competition in certain programs. And some of you are very familiar with the fact that there are now low-cost, and I would suggest low-quality competitors out there that are competing for the students in our high-quality programs. Now, the provost and the deans and the program directors are all working very actively on program-specific plans specific to each of our graduate programs to improve the long-term prospects of our graduate enrollment so that we can reverse this trend. Here's a chart that's showing law school enrollment. And again, Our law school enrollment peaked in 2010, and we've been deliberately reducing the size of the incoming class since 2010 for a couple of very important reasons. All across the country, since about 2009 to 2010, the number of college graduates who are taking the LSATs and the number of college graduates who are applying to the law schools have dropped quite significantly. So we've been deliberately constraining the size of our incoming first-year class in order to ensure that we maintain the quality of our admission standards, that we continue to enroll students in the law school who are capable of succeeding in that rigorous program, who are capable of then passing the bar, and also who are capable of getting a job after they graduate. And the second factor is the fact that law school admissions or law school applications have declined because the job prospects for law school graduates have declined quite substantially over the last 5 to 10 years. And we don't think it would be right to enroll students in law school knowing that a significant number of them might not be able to get a job after they graduate, after 3 or 4 years of their education. So for those two reasons, to maintain our standards and to align the size of our law school class with the job market, we have been deliberately constraining the size of the law school class. Now later at the end of the presentation, I'm going to talk to you about 4 initiatives in the law school to improve overall enrollment, not just in the JD program, the traditional law school program, but in some additional programs as well. So then here is the final factor that is affecting our overall enrollment, which is that even though enrollment has stayed steady or has declined in some programs, and this is a very positive factor, we have been continuing at a rapid rate to confer degrees and credentials on those students who are enrolled here. So at that other end of the pipeline, the success end of the pipeline, we've been doing a very good job collectively. Last year, as you see on the chart, was the largest number of degrees and credentials conferred in the history of the university, about 3,087. And this year, we're on track to do about 2,950, almost 3,000. Again, a very significant number. So as I said, we haven't, on one end of the pipeline, we haven't been filling it at the beginning of the pipeline as rapidly as we have been handing out diplomas at graduation. So when you combine all those factors together, this is a chart that shows fall total enrollment since 2004 through the fall of 2015. And as you see, there's been a modest but a steady decline when you put all of those factors together, a modest but steady decline in total enrollment over the last 4 years. And as you know, we are so dependent on tuition. The reason I'm presenting these slides in a budget presentation is, as you know, the institution is so dependent on tuition that it's critical for us to understand what's happening in terms of our enrollment patterns and to develop plans to deal with those challenges. And as I said, at the end of the presentation this morning, I will show you some of the short-term, just a few of the short-term and long-term strategies that we're implementing to improve our enrollment prospects. So the next topic in terms of providing the context for our finances is to show you what we're using one of our most important investments, our investments in scholarships and financial aid for our students. And this chart shows that in an increasingly competitive market, the one that I was describing just a moment ago, we have increased our financial investment in student financial support, both merit-based scholarships as well as need-based scholarships. And as you can see, over the last 7 or 8 years, our investment has grown substantially in order to respond to this increasingly competitive environment. Now, there are 3 principal reasons why we want to continue to invest in scholarships, in financial aid for our students. The first reason is because we want to use those resources to help us attract outstanding students, the best and brightest in the Commonwealth and throughout the tri-state region. The second reason is we want to use this as a tool to increase the diversity of our student population, something that is very important to us, is an element in our strategic plan. And the third principal goal is because we want to use scholarships to sustain enrollment. That is, in order to enhance the bottom line net tuition. A modest investment in a student who then pays a portion of tuition can be a financial benefit to the institution. So those are the 3 principal reasons why we've been making this extraordinary investment in scholarship. Now, there isn't really clear data as to whether or not on that third objective, whether this scholarship investment has actually been enhancing net tuition. And we continue to evaluate and analyze and use both a little bit of science and some art as well to determine whether or not that investment is paying off in terms of net tuition. And later this spring and in early summer, we're going to do a comprehensive analysis of the process by which we distribute scholarships and to whom we distribute those scholarships to really focus very carefully on whether we're achieving that third objective. But the data is very clear that with respect to those first two objectives, that our investment in scholarships is paying a great return. This is a chart that shows the median ACT and high school GPA of the entering full-time freshman class. As you see, since 2010 through the fall of 2015, the median high school GPA has risen from 3.0 to 3.4. And with respect to the median ACT, over that same period, it's gone from 21.4 to 23.7. To give you a sense of what that means, the ACT median, at 21.4, that's equivalent to roughly the national average, right? So our average, our 50 percentile is about at the 50 percentile nationally. At 23.7, we're above the 65th and going on to the 70th percentile. Those increases, both in high school GPA and ACT score increases over a relatively short period of time, is remarkable progress. A real sign, as I said, that that investment is paying off. And this return, these statistics, this is not about U.S. News rankings. It's not about reputational rankings. Everyone knows, all of our faculty and staff know that as we continue to attract outstanding students, it is improving the academic and intellectual experience for everybody on our campus. So this continues to be a very important priority for us. And then, as I mentioned, the second purpose is to enable us to attract a more diverse student body. And as you see on this chart, the scholarship investment is also substantially increasing the diversity of the student population. This chart focuses on three underrepresented minority groups: African American, Latino, and since 2010, we've allowed our students to self-identify as members of two or more races. And as you see, in just a 7-year period or 8-year period from 2007 to 2015, there's been nearly a 100% increase in the diversity of our undergraduate student population. As we talk about in our strategic plan, in the 21st century, we have to prepare our students to deal, to work, and to lead in an increasingly diverse community. And so this is an investment that is beneficial not just to the students who are represented on this chart, but this diversity is important for all of our students. So this is an investment, as I say, that is paying off quite substantially. So now the third contextual area, which is fixed costs, those costs over which we have little, if any, control. And more specifically, I'm going to talk a little bit about our KERS, our state pension system. So here is a chart that summarizes the increases in various fixed costs at the university this year compared to next year. So the first column that you see there are the current fixed costs that we estimate or project for fiscal year 16, the current budget year. Then you see in the second column what we anticipate those costs will be in next fiscal year, in fiscal year 17. The third column shows the difference between those figures, and then in the last column on the far right shows the percentage change. Now there's some good news on this chart, that if you look up at the utilities line, as you can see, we estimate that the utilities costs are going to continue actually to decline next year. And that's the result of a variety of things, including investments that we've made in energy efficiency all across campus. And working together, we've been able to constrain the increase in healthcare costs for the institutions. But the rapid increase in KERS pension rates continues to just simply put, it cripples our budget. As you can see at the bottom, next year we anticipate that fixed costs will increase by about $4.2 million. $3.8 million of that figure is KERS pension costs. And if you go all the way up to the chart that shows the KERS line, you see there's going to be an increase next year of $3.8 million, a 25% increase in that significant cost in just 1 year. You've seen this chart before if you've been to our presentations or if you've heard me talk about our advocacy initiatives, that it wasn't that long ago, only about 6 or 7 years ago, when the pension contribution rates were in the single digits or around 10%. This year, the current year, the pension contribution rate is 39%. Based upon the budget that was approved last week, next year that contribution rate is going to be 48.5%. And by fiscal year 18, the second year of this upcoming biennium, it'll be nearly 50%. An extraordinary increase in a short period of time. What does that translate to into dollars? As you can see, again, not that long ago, 2010, our total contribution figure was about $3.9 million. This year it's $15.3 million. Next year it'll be $19.1 million. And the following year, $19.4 million. Now, this is off of, over a 6-year period, a relatively stable pool of staff employees in this. This isn't because we've been substantially adding employees, as you know. This is simply the result of an increase in the rate. Just to give you, that's a 500% increase in 7 years in cost. And just to give you some additional context, in 2010, fiscal year 2010, at $3.9 million, that cost meant less than 2% of our overall budget. Next year, it will represent nearly 10% of the budget. So here's another chart. This then shows all the fixed costs, including KRS, bundled together. As you see, in fiscal year 2010, all of the fixed costs, including KRS, was $36.2 million. Next year, it's going to be $62.7, nearly 100% increase. You know, we often read in the media, or we hear people talk about how the cost of higher education over the last 6 years has outstripped the cost of inflation. Well, that may be true if you measure the cost of inflation through CPI, but that's not true at our institution. What this chart shows is that over that relatively short period of time, our costs of inflation have risen by about 100%. Our tuition has risen over that period of time, but nowhere near that cost increase, a cost increase that we have very little capacity to control. So now on to state appropriations, something that you all have watched carefully. This is another factor that has been affecting our budget, and frankly, over the last 10 years or more, this factor has been adversely affecting our budget as a result of a steady decrease in state support for higher education over that period of time. Now, that decline can't be attributed to one political party or another. Both parties have been involved in this process. It can't be attributed to the fact that the economy declined, because over the last 10 or 20 years in Kentucky and in other states, there has been a decreasing support for public higher education. The decline in public support for higher education has been a bipartisan initiative. The simple fact is that for 20 years, as a nation, we have been disinvesting in public higher education. And we need to do something. You have done something, but we need to do more to change that. So I'll get off my soapbox for just a minute and show you some statistics. This is a chart that shows the state appropriations that were approved at virtually midnight on Friday evening. So as you see, in the current fiscal year, our state appropriation is $48.5 million. As a result of a 4.5% budget cut in the next fiscal year, that will decline to $46.4 million. And then as a result of some additional funding to begin to address the funding disparity that has impeded our growth, we will add an additional $5.1 million in fiscal year 18 to bring us up to $51.5 million. And that piece of that slice up there in black is a very significant and positive step. This is very good news for our institution. You know, when I stood at this podium in January, near the end, I asked you to make them hear you down in Frankfurt. Since that period of time, this campus, faculty, staff, students, our community partners, concerned citizens all across the region, they sent 4,300 emails to the governor and to our elected officials. And as a result of your extraordinary advocacy, we received $5.1 million. That is a substantial return on the investment of your time and commitment, and I want to thank you very much for your effort. And I also want to recognize, where's Barry Kinzel? There's Barry. Barry is the president of the NKU Foundation. The NKU Foundation provided financial support. The advocacy committee provided great logistical support and added their voices. So I think we should give a round of applause to Barry and all of our good friends in the NKU Foundation. Barry, thank you. So that resolves two of the major variables. That budget resolved two of the variables, the uncertainty with respect to the KRS cost increases, as well as state support and the state appropriation. Another major variable, a significant contribution to our budget, is tuition, and whether or not and whether there is a tuition increase next year and what that tuition increase might be. So here's a chart that plots the percentage of undergraduate tuition rate increases over the last few years, going back to fiscal year 2002. And as you can see, over the last 7 years, since fiscal year 2010, we've substantially reduced the rate of tuition increases. As I mentioned a moment ago, over that period of time since 2010, our fixed costs have increased by 100%. But as you see on this chart, we have not increased tuition in any way to meet that cost. But students don't pay rates, they pay dollars. So this is a chart that shows, based upon our current semester tuition rate for undergraduate Kentucky residents, this year full-time student pays a little over $4,300. And this is a chart that shows what the dollar cost would be depending upon various tuition rate increases from 1% to 6%. Now, we are later today going to do a presentation for Catherine Hanel, who's the president of our Student Government Association, to show them some more information about potential tuition increases. As they already know, we are proposing very, very modest housing rate increases. I think across all housing options, it will be less than 1% cumulative. I'm also pleased to announce that this year we are going to ask the board once again to have no increases for students, faculty, and staff for parking. We recognize that if there are going to be cost increases and constraints on compensation, that is an expense that we can control. So once again, we're going to recommend to the board no increase in parking costs. So that's some additional context. We've not yet formalized a recommendation on tuition. We anticipate that we will do that after we receive input from the students. We'll formulate our recommendation to the board that they'll consider at the board meeting a week from Wednesday. So now with that context, let me share with you some information about how these various factors impact the bottom line for us, and the bottom line in terms of preparing a budget for this year and to think strategically about the budget for the following year. For several reasons, including primarily the additional increase of $5.1 million in fiscal year 2018, we are going to ask the board to look at our budget situation over a 2-year period so we can develop a more strategic approach to deal with the challenges that we're facing. Now, this is a chart, if you attended one of the forums, you're familiar with this chart. This gives you some sense of the financial impact of some of the additional variables. As you can see, there's a variable there for a compensation increase, a tuition increase. So 1% of tuition, I showed you what it meant to the student, but to the institution, a 1% increase in tuition translates into about $1 million. Now, just to give you some context about what that means, next year, as I mentioned a moment ago, our state appropriation is going to decline by about 2.1, or actually closer to $2.2 million. Our KRS contribution will increase by $3.8 million. You put those two together, and that's $6 million. So what does that mean? That means if we raise tuition by 6%, all that would do was generate the revenue simply to make up for the shortfall in state appropriation and the additional KRS increase. We don't intend to ask the board to approve a tuition rate increase of 6%, but it gives you, that calculation gives you the sense of the magnitude of the challenge we face as a result of the decisions in Frankfurt. So how does that, then, those various factors impact our budget over the next 2 years? And this is a chart that summarizes that budget over that 2-year period, the next 2 years. And it assumes now a couple of the variables that we talked about, a 5% cut in the appropriation for fiscal year 17, the additional $5.1 million in additional funding in fiscal year 18. It then includes a couple of other factors which I'll identify. I'll just identify some of the other assumption that goes into these numbers, and then I'll explain what those numbers mean. Given the pipeline issue and demographic challenges that I explained a few moments ago at the outset, our budget over the next 2 years is going to be based upon an assumption that enrollment next year will decline by 2%, and that our enrollment will decline by another 1.5% in 18. We are going to develop a very conservative forecast because we know the demographic and pipeline challenges that we're facing. It includes also a continuing investment in scholarships. It takes into account some cost savings measures. As you know, last year we were able to transition the operations of the Met Center to St. Elizabeth's. That is factored in here. That is going to save us somewhere between $300,000 and $400,000. When you put all of those factors together, what you see is, and I'll just use 4% as an example. What that chart shows is that if we were to increase tuition by 4%, we will have to deal with a budget reduction of about $6.6 million. But if we also had a 4% tuition increase for the next fiscal year, we'll actually have a surplus of about $2.1 million. So what that would mean over that 2-year period is actually about a $4.5 million deficit. Does that chart make sense? Okay. So this is giving us the capacity, as I said before, to develop a budgeting strategy for the board that will allow us to have a more comprehensive and strategic approach to the 2-year period, not just dealing with our budget on a 1-year basis. I want to just show you a chart, though, that if we had not obtained that additional equity funding in fiscal year 18, the picture would have been bleak. We have the capacity to deal with this challenge, but if we were facing that 2-year budget period without that additional support, the magnitude of the budget reductions would have been quite substantial. So again, this is a testament to the significance of the role that you and so many others played in persuading the governor and the General Assembly to provide that additional support to our institution. Now I want to show you a chart, and I promised Russ I would keep this brief. This is a chart that I took from our comptroller's annual presentation to the board, and it's simply designed to illustrate one point, that over the last 5 or 10 years, notwithstanding substantial challenges, budget challenges, we have continued to maintain a sound financial position in terms of the net assets, the unrestricted net assets that the institution has, in essence, in an institutional savings account. And what this is that figure divided by full-time equivalent students so that it can show our financial position relative to the other comprehensive universities and relative to our peer institutions as assessed by Moody's. And as you can see with that gold line, we are in a solid financial position, particularly when compared to those other institutions. That gives us the financial capacity to weather a bit of a deficit in the first year of the biennium, knowing that we'll make some investments and take steps over a 2-year period that will enable us to have a balanced budget over that 2-year period. Russ, did I screw that up at all, or did I do okay? Okay, good. I told Russ he couldn't come to the microphone and correct me, so I'm hoping I did that okay. So then let me transition then to the next steps. As I mentioned at the outset, because the General Assembly didn't reach a budget compromise until nearly midnight on Friday, we really haven't had adequate time to look at all of the different division plans and look at all of those different variables and come to you this morning at 9 o'clock and present specific details about those strategies over the next year or two. It's going to take us a couple more weeks in consultation with the Board of Regents to finalize those plans and to present them to the board in mid-May. And as I said, the board also wants, given the significance of those plans, the board wants an additional time to contemplate what those strategies should be. So here's the process. Here are the next steps that we're going to take over the next 30 days. We will present a tuition recommendation to the board at its regularly scheduled meeting on April 27th. Then in the intervening period over the next 15 to 21 days, we're going to finalize the budget plan not only for next fiscal year, but the strategies over that 2-year biennium. Then I anticipate before the end of the week, the board will schedule a special board meeting for sometime in the middle of May, and the sole agenda item at that special board meeting will be to receive our recommendations and to approve a budget for next fiscal year 17. Also, over the next days and weeks and months ahead, we're going to continue to evaluate some of the ideas and suggestions that we heard from you during the course of our budget consultation. We're going to continue to phase in the budget model, and then we're going to continue to explore other steps that will shore up the university budget. This is a list, just wanted to share with you, this is a list, not an exhaustive list, but just a list of some of the ideas that were generated by you, the faculty, the staff, and our students, in our various surveys and in the open forums. And this is a list of some of those ideas. They require some careful study. There's some good ideas on this list, and there's some good ideas that we didn't have space to put on this list. But they require some more evaluation, some more study to determine whether they're feasible, to determine how to implement them if they're feasible, and to calculate the cost savings associated with them. So I wanted you to know that even though we don't have specific action items for these specific suggestions, we are going to develop processes to evaluate whether these would be beneficial, and we're grateful for your input. One of the things that I've heard some questions about is why did we decide to explore the possibility, and I emphasize the possibility, of selling WNKU. There's no doubt that that radio station is a community asset, and there's no doubt that it provides value to our institution. But as you can see on this chart, and you may recall when I put up a similar chart last year, the costs to the university of subsidizing the operations of WNKU have continued to escalate at a time that we're facing some significant financial challenges. So I simply thought it was prudent to evaluate what our options are. And that's why we're engaging a broker to determine what the market might be if we were to be interested in selling WNKU. And those are simply the facts and the figures that demonstrate why I believe this is a prudent step. But as I've said several times, the most important factor that will determine our financial health is our ability to attract and retain outstanding students. And this is a factor, we don't have complete control over this, but we have a lot of control over this factor, and it's one that we're going to continue to work together on. I want to share some more details about our enrollment recruitment strategies. So this is a chart that summarizes or describes just a few of those strategies, and as you'll see in this series of slides, broken down by various sectors of the university, we've broken them down into short-term strategies and long-term strategies. Under the short-term strategies for new freshmen, we want to continue to work and leverage the investment of our marketing and communication so that it's focused not exclusively but primarily on enhancing our ability to attract students. We also want to build specific pipelines with certain outstanding high schools all across the state and all around the region. We've got a good relationship with the Innovation Academy at Kenton County. Many of you know we have been developing good relationships at Elkhorn Crossing High School. Last year I had the good fortune to be at the Youth Performing Arts School, which is a school associated with DuPont Manual, an outstanding high school in Louisville. They have an outstanding performing arts program, and there's increasing interest by those talented students in what we're doing in our School of the Arts here at NKU. Over the longer term, we want to take advantage of expanded housing options. You know, it was only a couple years ago that we added Northern Terrace. It took us from about 17,000 beds to about 2,000 beds. Last year, our occupancy at the beginning of the fall 15 semester was in excess of 100%. This year, we have the largest number of beds and the highest occupancy rate of those beds in the history of the university. And at this point, in terms of applications for beds in our residence halls next fall, we have 300 more applications this year than we had last year when we had an occupancy rate in excess of 100%. So we have real opportunities as we continue to expand our residential living option to attract outstanding freshmen to come to NKU. We also can anticipate when the Health Innovation Center comes online that will be a magnet for students, and we want to use a variety of programs on campus, everything from Governor's Scholars to the Sweet 16 girls basketball tournament to a variety of other campus activities to enable us to continue to attract great students, new freshman undergraduate students. We also need to focus on transfer students. We want to take advantage of our online programs and expand those online opportunities, perhaps with an external partner. We also have, over the past 2 years, executed pathway agreements with Cincinnati State and with Gateway. In the next couple of weeks, we'll be signing one with KCTCS down in Carrollton County. And those strategies will enable us to attract outstanding students from those two institutions and beyond. We also want to build additional pathways with other institutions. With respect to graduate programs, as I mentioned, the deans, the program directors, and the faculty are developing program-specific plans for our graduate programs to enhance enrollment. And we know one of the things that we see on that, you'll see on that slide, is focusing not just on full degree programs, but stackable certificates. One of the things that we heard from the external community when we were consulting with them about the programs in the Health Innovation Center is not every training program needs to be a full-blown degree. So we're going to develop, not only in connection with the Health Innovation Center, but all across the graduate programs, stackable certificate programs that will enhance enrollment and meet the needs of the community. I mentioned the College of Law. As you see on this chart, there really are 4 key strategies to support enrollment and success in our law school. One is to use our scholarship dollars to attract a talented and diverse student body. We now have a 3+3 program on our campus, and we're developing I believe we've signed a 3+3 agreement. Where's Jeff Standen? I saw him there. Where is he? We have a 3+3 now with Thomas More, and we intend to expand that program with other colleges and universities. We also have the authority to now confer an MLS degree. This is a formal degree short of a JD, and enrollment will start to grow in that program, and we now have authority to offer a new LLM degree that we can use to attract international students to Chase. And speaking of international, we also have short-term and long-term strategies with respect to recruiting students from other countries around the world. Now, this is related to our efforts to diversify and expand our own student body by providing study abroad opportunities for them as well. Now, we have to recognize this can't be a short-term investment. The prospect of building the pipeline for international students requires patience and persistence over a long period of time, but it is important to the long-term strategy for the institution. And we also need, as I said earlier, to continue to focus on retention. This year, we're implementing for the first time a program we're calling Summer Spark. It's a summer bridge program for students who are at risk. They'll come to campus and take courses for a 4 or 5 week period. It's designed to help them prepare for the increasing rigor of a college education, as well as the way in which college students study, which is different than the way high school students study. I mentioned our efforts to expand long-term expand in the long-term housing opportunities. The other thing that we're starting to realize with respect to retention is that some of our students have relatively small financial needs that are preventing them from enrolling in the next semester. And we're doing an analysis of those needs, and we're going to develop a program to provide micro scholarships, targeted scholarships for students who just have a small amount of need, and that if we can help them bridge that need, we know that they'll re-enroll and likely to succeed. So that's a variety of strategies that we're doing to improve the retention of our students. And as I said earlier, your support for those strategies is critical. So then let me conclude with just a couple of observations. Maybe let me state what perhaps is the obvious. I know that it is unpleasant. It's not the best opportunity to hear some of the challenges that we continue to face. It's not easy to deliver sobering news, and I know it's even harder to hear about some of this information. I understand that and appreciate that fact. But I also recognize and appreciate that it's also a bit unsettling that you don't have some specific information today about what that budget is. I understand that that uncertainty creates additional anxiety. But I ask you to consider, in this next 30 days, I ask you to consider just 2 things. First, just on a specific level. Please understand that this additional time is going to help us to develop a more strategic approach to the challenges that we face this year and next. That rather than jerking from one deficit to a possible surplus, that it would be more prudent for us to take the next 15, 20, 30 days and develop a smooth and strategic and comprehensive approach to that 2-year period. But the second thing, and really I think perhaps the most important thing that I'd ask you to do, is to recognize that in that period, we're going to come together again as a university community to celebrate the most important day in any university year, and that is commencement. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to confer degrees and credentials on nearly 3,000 students this year. And in the May commencement alone, I believe there are about 1,400 students that are eligible to receive a degree. And I have the honor, really the honor of standing on that platform and handing them that degree as a result of the hard work of so many people all across campus. We know they wouldn't be there without their own dedication, but we also know and appreciate they wouldn't have that success without the sacrifices that you have made, the sacrifices that you've made to help their dreams come true. So there'll be about 1,400 of them at commencement of the 3 commencement ceremonies in May. And I wanted to just tell you about a small number of those students so that you can remember once again how important how honorable our basic mission is, the things that we do every day. So the first is TJ Schuyler. TJ is a chemistry major, and he's also minoring in physics. After his freshman year, TJ joined a research group investigating non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug carriers. And though the project required techniques that most freshmen wouldn't be capable of doing, TJ had the aptitude and the desire to develop those techniques, and he quickly mastered the equipment and the group's advanced work. Soon he then expanded an international research program into an actual exchange program. He was the first NKU chemistry major to conduct summer research abroad. More recently, he's been working on a project dealing with microwave-assisted synthesis and characterization of polymer-grafted composite materials by surface-initiated polymerization from organoclase. And he's presented his work at national chemistry conferences. He's tutored students in chemistry and physics, and he's even developed, as an undergraduate, he's developed teaching techniques that fit each student that he tutored to fit their own personal learning style. And when he graduates, he wants to go to graduate school, and he wants to be a college professor. So this is A.J. Ryan. A.J. was born with a condition called arthrogryposis. He is, as you can see in this photograph, he's confined to a wheelchair. He's unable to use his hands or his arms, but that doesn't stop him. He's a media informatics major, and he uses his feet to operate his keyboard and the mouse. During his time at our university, he's developed a number of video games for clients in our Center for Applied Informatics. One of those games has been ranked by Google as a top 500 app. AJ also founded his own startup called Inclusive Games. He's making video games. He's making video games that people with disabilities can enjoy. AJ is, as I've heard from many, he's an inspiration to his fellow students and to the faculty and staff in our College of Informatics. He is an inspiration to all of us. This is Kathy Sills. Kathy is an international studies major. She is a voice for students across campus through her volunteer work in social affairs and in community service. She supports students facing sexual and gender identity issues. She works with Common Ground, LGBTQ programs and services, and the Asexual Conversation Support Group. That's an organization that she founded herself. She's been an NKU community ambassador, an international student connection mentor, and a representative for International Studies program. She's volunteered at Hometown Food Pantry at the Brighton Center. She's been helping at-risk middle school students there. She came to our university, this is what she said, she came to our university unsure of what she wanted to do with her life. And now, just like TJ, she wants a career in higher education. And here's what she had to say about her experience at our university. These are her words. "The support and opportunities I have received from the university were life-changing, and I want to be able to provide those experiences to other students in the future. I have become a stronger, more adventurous, more socially aware individual, and I believe that those attributes will help me be a better person as I continue on to my next adventure in life." This is Natalia Weekly. She has, to say the least, left a mark on our institution. She's taught University 101. She's been a presidential ambassador. She's been a residential assistant. She was president of Leadership Mentors. She's an orientation leader, co-director of the Northern Kentucky Leadership Institute, co-lead mentor of NKU Rocks, and president of the Activities Programming Board. She also worked in Steele Library, and after being named the Homecoming Princess in 2014, Natalia helped redefine our homecoming experience by expanding a program that incorporated all student organizations across campus. She volunteered her time to organizations on campus such as Fuel NKU and many beyond our campus such as Holmes High School, the Brighton Center, Ronald McDonald House, and Stepping Stones. Simply put, Natalia is a servant leader. And this is Alma Onate. Alma is a pre-med chemistry major with minors in biology and honors. She has earned an impressive grade point average of 3.925. But academic success is only one part of her life story. Alma's sister, when Alma was young, Alma's sister contracted a serious eye disease, which compelled her family to immigrate to the United States in order to seek better care. That care then also caused significant financial struggles, which led to her family losing their home last year. Alma found herself homeless. She was homeless in the middle of the semester, and she was struggling to find a place to live while she was continuing to work in that rigorous program. Those around her didn't even know the challenges that she was facing. She kept a positive attitude, she kept up with her classwork, and she continued to volunteer, both on campus and off campus. Here's what Professor Diana McGill wrote about Alma. Alma is able to succeed under conditions that would crumble many students. And for this, I am in awe of this young woman's attitude and her abilities. And so are we all. Alma is deciding where to attend graduate school. And the competition to recruit Alma is fierce. She's considering attending Harvard. They have flown her from our area to Boston twice already to recruit her. So those are just 5 of the thousands of stories of our students on our campus. 5 of the stories of the women and men who will graduate this year. So 2 years ago, we began to describe our fundamental purpose. We began to describe that fundamental purpose in the form of 3 simple but bold promises. We promised to put our students first in everything we do every day. We then made a second commitment. We made a commitment to lead with excellence. And then third, we promised to have a lasting impact on our students so that they could have a lasting impact on their families, on the community, and our country. These students, just a small sampling, these students demonstrate that notwithstanding significant financial challenges, and that's the truth, we're facing significant financial challenges, but notwithstanding those challenges, you, our faculty and staff, you continue to honor those important promises. I know you make professional and personal sacrifices to put our students first. I know that you strive to teach and to tutor, to come up with new research, new creative activities. Our facilities folks work every day to make our campus beautiful. You continue to lead with excellence, notwithstanding those challenges. And your dedication continues to have a lasting impact on these men and women. And so on behalf of the 3,000 women and men who will graduate from NKU this year, on behalf of 15,000 students, I simply say thank you. Thank you very much, and have a good day.